Hold on. Let me get my other guitar. That one is missing a string.
Edit this. You can edit this.
What should I say? Like, what's the topic?
Apoliticism.
Yeah.
What is it? Contemporary youth.
Yeah.
All right, you ready?
Yes.
So we're gonna talk about things in this group, and it's founded by my friend Meredith, and it's called Contemporary Youth.
Very nice.
Lovely.
I might have to take off the streamer headphones because I'm realizing that I can hear better without them on.
Dang, streamer headphones.
All right, guys.
They were very cool though, Meredith.
Yeah.
Very awesome. I tried to ask like Connor and Teddy for recommendations for like gaming headphones, and they denied me answers and said, I don't know what you're up to, but I don't like the sounds of it.
Meredith, you said that on a group chat. If I had known headphones, I would have given you a good. You should have asked Vijay.
I think Vijay might have said something along the same lines.
I feel like he would have told you eventually. Maybe not.
Vijay doesn't follow me back, so I don't think so.
He was like, I didn't know who was running the account, and I told him it was you, and he was like, oh, I have to follow her back. He must have forgotten.
You're good. Okay, guys. So, apoliticism. That is not a word. Apoliticism. Do we think it's okay? Like, personally, I feel like there's a lot of apoliticism just like among people like in our like age group. Like, do you guys agree with that? I feel like that's kind of a problem, but
I agree. I think that a lot of I'm taking the headphones off. I think that a lot of the problems that come along with apoliticism in our age group especially are like, they're not just us, right? Not necessarily just like angsty teens being, oh, whatever, right?
yeah.
You know, I feel like we learn a lot of it from, you know, what's going on in the media and the mainstream right now. And I feel like that is a big influencer on not just our age group, but all people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people in our age group who are sort of not really involved in politics, but there's also a lot who are, and who are, you know, very engaged. And, you know, and that's a good thing, even though, you know, we can't vote. It's good that we are informed, you know, regardless of our, you know, political beliefs. It is good to be informed. So I think there's probably a mix in there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I also think a lot of apoliticism comes from the fact that we are told that we are children and that we shouldn't be involved in politics because we're too young. And it's like not something that we should be thinking about at this age. And I think, I mean, we all live on Earth together. We're all in the same population. So I think something needs to be said for the fact that our opinions are equally valid to those of people who are more educated, and some are actually more educated, or who are older and use that seniority like to hold over our heads. But I don't think that age should really play a part in whether or not you are politically involved. Like,
yeah.
I can't vote because we're under the age of 18, but there are so many other things that we can be doing, like encouraging those who are eligible to vote to do so instead of just staying silent.
Adding on to what Jacob was saying, this kind of ties into Vaya's point. Like, there's so many like what we're seeing in politics right now and in the media, I feel like there's a lot of, you know, lack of empathy. And when it's the people who are in power and are in like the position to like hold their like job title or their age like above our heads and say, no, like you're too young to be doing this, but they're not taking action, like at some point it has to become our responsibility too, if the people who we rely on to do these things aren't
Like,
doing them.
like really in this day and age where we have social media and we have, it's so easy for us to have a news intake to educate ourselves. It's so easy, thankfully, for the internet and social media. Like any generation really before ours or before the last 15-20 years or so didn't have that option really to have some sort of political media news intake, where it's like people who hold their authority or their seniority over our age groups, like, oh, you're young, you haven't lived enough life. Like, because of technology, our political intake or our news intake could be just as high, if not higher than anybody else's, really. Like, at this day and age, the amount of information that you take in is completely up to you, really.
Yeah, but I would also add on to that, if there is like, I think, a nuance to that, because if you read the news, so as Denzel Washington has famously said, if you don't read the news, you're uninformed. If you do read the news, you're misinformed. So I think there's probably a balance where, I think probably a lot of young people are sort of reading maybe one or two sources, but, we're inheriting this world, and we are going to be, in charge of fixing some of the problems that we have today, because when we, are of age, those are going to be our problems. So I think there is a duty to be informed, but also to be, correctly informed, and to read a variety of sources, and to make sure you know the facts, because that's really important. So yeah, I would just add that on. But I do agree with you, Jacob.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like just what Gabe said was a duty to be informed, and I think that's I feel like I'm gonna get into a personal thing with like the podcast, but like that's part of the reason I just started this thing up, is because like Gabe said, I think it's our duty to be informed, and like in this day and age, like Jacob is saying, we can really self-educate ourselves, and it's a valuable tool to be on the internet and talking about this type of thing and learning about this type of thing.
Yeah, and especially with the internet, I think it's important to know how to use like your platform to create change. And I think there are a lot of people that are working towards doing that. And that's definitely important for us, but it's also very easy to hide behind a screen. And so I know like sharing your political opinion is something that can be nerve-wracking, especially because everybody has like differences of opinion, and that can cause conflict. But I think we should go farther than just like using our technology. I think we should strive to have more of these conversations. I think under different circumstances, we would be doing this in person. I think we should strive to have more of those conversations together and just have it be normal. And we should normalize just talking about these like important topics, like at dinner or with your friends. I think it's important to have those conversations and just like, I don't know, work together and create change, because I think there's a lot of people working by themselves to try and make a difference, which is possible. Like one person can make so much of a difference, but when we're together, we're stronger.
Yeah, I agree. one of the responses to some of my stories have been like about, I know so many people who like have opinions about this type of thing, but they're just, I think it's so great that what you're trying to do is, getting more youth voices out there. And I think that's a step, but like what Vaya was saying is
Grandma. There we go.
I feel like there's if we can just normalize it, like I feel like now there's so many people who are like, like I'm not into politics, like I'm not gonna name call, but like when protests started, like or not name call, I'm not gonna say this person's name, but if they watch it, they'll know who they are.
Sounds like you're talking about a very specific person.
Vaya will know who I'm talking about because she was there actually, but like I didn't. So when politics first started to come onto TikTok, it was like there were mixed reactions, but among my friends, one person in particular was very, very against it. They're like, why do we need to bring politics onto TikTok? And like, I can understand that, but at the same time, it's like, reminds me of people who are like, I don't like, let's not get political. Like, let's not, I'm not into politics. Like, what?
Yeah, I guess I sort of know what you're saying, but I would also say that like there should be spaces where like there you don't have to have politics in every place. TikTok, I don't know about TikTok, but I'm not going to try to state one way or another on that, but I think there should be spaces where we don't have to talk about politics, and there should be spaces where we do, because that's just as important. But yeah, I mean, I think at our age, like being really not involved in politics is less of a deal than being someone who's eligible to vote and really directly make change and put their opinion out there. So but I would say it's still important.
But I mean, I would agree that I think that some places should have access to politics and some shouldn't. But when it comes down to like those times or those people with opinions that are more similarly to, oh, let's not get political. Why can't we have politics? Stay out of it. A lot of the times, or at least what politics is in this day and age, and what has been for a long time, there are things in politics that aren't politics. Like there are things where it's like, I'm not worrying about like a budget or a bill that's being passed, right? There are things that in politics that come down to human rights, and those are things that people can't ignore. Like, okay, if person A, doesn't want to talk about like the freaking, I don't know, where the money in the US is going to be spent, or, well, not necessarily, because that's also another thing. But like if someone's going to be like, oh, I don't want to talk about, something that's political, that doesn't have regard to necessarily like quality of someone's living or someone's access to like healthcare, right? Those are very different. Someone's access to healthcare versus something else that's a difference between a human right and, in my opinion, a human right.
Yeah, but we should make a distinction where, like, I think there is two sides, because I totally get, like, you should be involved in politics, is just my personal opinion. But at the same time, like, claiming one issue is political one issue is not political and has nothing to do with politics and is about human rights, well, I think we're sort of guiding over the fact that there are policies being proposed to address the problems that are in those issues. So inherently that does become political, and inherently if we're talking about policies, government, big changes, then yeah, there's going to be different policies that are being proposed, and that is political, and politics doesn't have to be a bad thing, right? But I would probably caution against saying like, oh well, this issue is human rights, and Jacob, I know you're not saying this, but I've heard some people who do, which is that says this issue is human rights, and if you don't agree with my specific policy, then you're not for these human rights, and that's a bit childish and not productive, I would say.
Well, like let's can I give you an example, Gabe, and
Sure.
get your opinion on it. So like what about something where it's like, say I'm getting lunch with you, right? And I bring up, so did you hear that the Trump administration, I believe the bill or the whatever you want to call it, was to prevent from transgender people from being in the army, right? And it just recently got denied, which I'm a fan of. Now, would you consider that like political or human right thing?
So I would agree with your position on that. I was more referencing like movements like healthcare for all and some other stuff where like sort of what I was talking about, which is, I mean, I think you have a good point, which is some things are, for human rights, but a lot of things aren't, right? A lot of things are for human rights, but they're different policies that are trying to address those problems. So it's not a one-way street. There can be opinions on both sides, but in the example that you just cited, no, there should be no discrimination. And if those people want to serve our country, that's admirable, right? So there's no reason why we should be blocking, those people from serving.
So Gabe, when you're talking about like people using human rights as like so what do you think about like, do you agree that, would you say that healthcare is a human right? Or like when people
Yes.
say that, like Bernie or like AOC, like, do you think that's a bad thing? Like using that to pass a bill or something?
I think I get where you're coming from. I do think healthcare is a human right, right? I do. But the only thing I would disagree with is, a socialized way of medicine, right? I think healthcare is a human right, and I think we can accomplish that through, we don't have to accomplish that through, what maybe Bernie or AOC is proposing, right? I mean, that's the thing is, if you say healthcare is a human right, which I agree with, and then you say, and then you have to support my plan for healthcare, it's like, well, wait a minute. There are more than one plans for healthcare, and so using that as like, I guess, I mean, I wouldn't say, I mean, I don't know really how to put it, but using that as saying, well, you have to support it because it's a human right is like, well, no, you should support the best solution in your opinion, and that may not be the one proposed.
But I saw this post on Instagram, and it was like, voting or policy, is it's not like an Uber ride. You're not going to get exactly where you want to go every time. It's more like a bus stop where like you're going to get dropped off and you're going to have to walk a little bit. There's some give and take there, right? Where you're going to have to vote for the one that's closest to you believe in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, there's a lot of people who don't agree with 100% of what Trump is doing and
Right.
don't agree with 100% of what Biden is doing, but in the end, they're going to vote for one or the other.
Yeah, that's absolutely, yeah, I mean, that's true. That's about voting. I mean, if we're talking about policy, right now with voting, we have two candidates. So like at that, you have to choose one, frankly, or you just don't vote. So that post is absolutely correct. One candidate may not absolutely, 100% support, what all you believe in, but as long, you need to do what's best for the country in your opinion. So it's different with policy though, because there are more than two policies. And, so there are multiple policies or multiple proposals, on a whole number of issues. So, I think it's probably different for policy.
Going back to what you said about, yes, how we only have two options, and then a lot of people are going to opt to not vote. And that is a huge issue. Um, I think I know, like the post that Jacob was talking about, we need to choose the direction that we think is going to get us closer to the final destination. And I think there are a lot of people, just in general, I think, who are struggle to like quote unquote pick a side because I'm sure that they could agree with certain beliefs on the Democratic side and certain beliefs on the Republican side, and so they feel like they're stuck in the middle. And I think that's where apoliticism comes from, because people are at a crossroads. They don't know, and this like decision when you're voting, that matters. And so I don't think a lot of people know how much a single vote can do and how important actually going to the poll and putting that vote in is. Because I feel like it's just like, oh, I turned 18, like I can vote now. It's like a rite of passage, but I don't think we talk enough about how like influential that rite of passage actually is and how much you can do with that. I think people take it for granted, honestly.
Yeah. No, yeah. There's a lot of countries that don't have a democracy like ours.
I don't know if anyone else has seen, sorry, Jacob. I don't know if anyone else has seen like the post on, I don't know where it came from. Maybe, I don't know where it came from, but if I find out, I'll put it on like the YouTube thing. But if anyone else saw the like diagram, and it's like what we think 2016 looked like and what it actually looked like, and it's like about half of eligible voters is just like nobody voted, and then the other 2/4 was like about half and half. Like, I don't know if anyone else saw that, but we assume that, I don't know, I just assumed everyone voted in 2016, but in reality, there's so many people who don't vote, and that's kind of how we got here, I guess. But I don't really know what I'm trying to say with this, but I just thought I would bring up the diagram.
Yeah, and I mean, I personally am not one to go by like everything in the Constitution or everything in the amendments. Like, oh, I'm not necessarily one to praise the founding fathers or all that, history and follow it, word for word. But there was this one thing that I've heard, and I forget where it came from, some old document where it's like everybody has two things that they need to do as like an American citizen, and that you're like really should be obliged to do, which is to pay taxes and to vote and exercise your right of opinion.
Yeah, it shows something that, that you don't, I mean, you don't really have to. I think the Constitution itself has guided us in, very, I don't want to say, I mean, it's been a guiding principle for our democracy. So, there is some wisdom there. And, that's right. Everyone should vote because, as Vaya was making a great point earlier, is that there are a whole lot of countries who do not have, a democracy like ours. You do not have the freedom that is in our country. So, that should not be taken for granted.
It shouldn't, but then again, I feel like when it comes to patriotism and when it comes to, having love for where your nation, that it's actually, in my opinion, it's more patriotic to even when your country is better than a lot of others, or not, I don't want to say better, when your country is a lot of benefits to it or a lot of upsides to it that a lot of other places may not, to still try to, I think it's more patriotic to actually still have criticisms and to still find places to work out. Because look, the U.S., it's got a lot, like there's a lot more freedom here than a lot of other places. There's a lot more of this, a lot more of that, right? It's a generally better place, but then there's still a lot of things like the kind of form of chrono capitalism that we have going on with, redlining and, just like a biased plagued system, really, that's happened since the beginning. And there's places that are a lot worse than the US has it. But like to still be able to acknowledge those problems is good. And to just be blind to them. I think it was a Desmond Tutu quote where it's like by being neutral on 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 a matter is to choose the side of the oppressor.
Yeah, I think what I would say to that is this, which is, yeah, you there, yeah. I mean, like, in order to no country will be perfect, but we as a country have some serious problems that we need to face, um, on a wide spectrum of things. But that doesn't mean we can't recognize the fact that, we are privileged to live here in this country as Americans. I mean, you want to talk about privilege, like privilege is being born American, because you are automatically have a lot more opportunities than, someone say born in another country, where, things aren't as good as here. So you do make a good point, Jacob. And I don't think anyone's disagreeing with you.
And I agree. I think we should, just like with anything in life, like, let's talk about, I'm going to bring up swimming, and you are swimming breaststroke and your coach gives you a pointer. You are always striving to have a better technique. And I think that we as Americans should always be striving to have a better country and doing all that we can to improve, because we've come far, but we've also gone backwards, especially this year. And I've also seen how passionate people are about the Black Lives Matter movement and how much our generation can do and how much of an impact we can make due to collective anger. And we have seen something that we want to change, and we are working to make that change. And I think that is a huge difference from generations in the past. And I know that we wouldn't be here today without those generations, but right now I can say that our generation is fighting for human rights. And I'm impressed, but we still need to do more, because there are a lot of us that are staying quiet. And I don't think that we can have that happen right now.
Again, back to that Desmond Tutu quote: choosing silence is, or choosing, being in between, choosing silence is choosing the side of the oppressor.
So Vaya, I'm a bit interested.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sorry, I just got. I'm a bit interested. So when you say fighting for human rights, I guess what I would say is that, there are policy. I know, going back to the topic of apoliticism, there are policies intertwined with that, the Black Lives Matter movement, that sort of makes it inherently political, right? Because and on the one hand, I totally agree with the message, right? Of course, I inherently believe Black Lives Matter. But then when they, when it is proposed certain policy decisions like defunding or abolishing the police, something that's going to happen on a national scale, that does become political. And I think that, these problems, are okay to be addressed politically. Our system of government, we need to address them, politically. And so I think I would call it probably a political movement, but that's not a bad thing, right? Because there are policies intertwined. So yeah, I mean, I know some of you are.
Well, I'm gonna disagree with you here a little bit, Gabe, just a little bit, where I think that, something like the Black Lives Matter movement, is a human rights movement, and I just think that the ways that we go about attempting to fix them are political.
That's it. Yeah, that's what I was saying, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
The statement Black Lives Matter is not political at all. And I think it should just be taken as a fact. Like, it should just be accepted. And I don't think there should ever be a question to whether or not they matter. But they're like the aspects of the movement, some of them are political, but I think like the broad term for the movement is not. Does that make sense?
Yes, does me at least.
Yeah. Going back to what Vaya was saying about like, if there's a or also Jacob, if there's a problem with something, it's more patriotic. If there's a problem in like our government or like with how we're running, it's more patriotic to do something about it. One thing I feel like that's very common with like patriotism, at least in the United States, is like bringing up gun control and like your right to bear arms, but also at the same time we're talking about how it's more patriotic to, you know, want the best for your country and look to make changes, but also at the same time when people are like against gun control, they're citing the Constitution. And I don't know what you guys think about gun control, but Gabe, would you say that's a human rights issue or a political issue?
Well, I don't know that people, yeah, I do think a lot of people, when they're arguing against gun control, cite the Constitution, but there's a variety of other factors that like
amendments
go into that.
I don't know. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, you were right that a lot of them do cite the Constitution. But I mean, are you asking if I think that's a political issue or not? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think there's a line, like at the same time, you have to look at if solutions are being proposed. If you were to say to me, like, if you could snap your fingers and stop all mass shootings from happening, I'd be like, okay, where do I sign up? Like, let's do that. That is a human rights issue. But the problem is there's policy involved, and there are different aspects of policy that we can implement to sort of combat this problem. So when people say, well, it's a human rights issue, and if you don't agree with that and you don't support gun control, then you are somehow like a terrible person and you are like, you know, against human rights. And that's just wrong. Like, you know, if we have to recognize that, you know, policies are involved, and, you know, a lot of people are thinking about what policies will help this problem and what policies will hurt it. So, like, you know, we have to find a common ground there.
Sort of like connecting to what Gabe was saying, I think it's hard to attempt to invalidate someone's opinion if you're arguing on different terms. And I think that everyone is entitled to their opinion, but it's also like when we choose to share our opinion about certain political topics, it matters. Like what the setting is definitely matters, because the way what you were talking about can be perceived differently, like depending on like the conversation you're having or the group of people you're with, which I think is super interesting. But there's definitely a time and place to like voice a specific opinion. And I think like, is what I'm saying making sense? I'm not sure if that.
Yeah.
But I feel like if we're talking about like in a Harkness discussion, there's like something to be said about, I think any opinion that directly like would inflict harm on a human being or strip them of their rights is like something, I don't really know the words I'm trying to looking for here, but I just think that those opinions are
not opinions.
Yeah.
Well, I think that a lot of that comes down to what Vaya used the term rights, and I think that a lot of people have a different idea of what constitutes someone's right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like to me personally, human rights falls more under the line of someone's physical and mental well-being, right? Rather than, oh, you know, it says in the Constitution that it's my right as an American citizen to bear arms. You know what I mean? I feel like that's not necessarily within the same lines as having, having like birth control be free, or having, free healthcare for everybody, right? You see, I feel like those are very, very different things.
I agree. Going back to what Vaya was saying, like, Gabe, I want to know, like, what you think, like, when something political inherently has something to do with someone's, like, physical and mental well-being, like what Jacob was saying, like when is it okay to just say, like, that's not an opinion you can have? Like,
Okay.
is that ever?
Yeah, I mean, I think like there's a line we need to draw, because I think as a society, we say too much. There is a right opinion and a wrong opinion. Now, let's look at both those opinions. I'm going to use gun control as an example. The right opinion for a lot of people is either ban all guns or make it really hard to get a gun in order to, curb mass shootings, right? Am I correct in saying that?
Sure.
So then another opinion is that, well, another opinion would be someone against gun control saying, okay, well, I don't believe in that, right? And where it gets conflated is someone is on one side and saying, oh, well, usually the gun control side, which is saying, oh, well, this is a human rights issue, and your opinion is not valid because you don't support human rights / my policy proposal. And it's like, because, I mean, think about it. Banning guns is a policy proposal, right? So if someone doesn't support that, they don't have the wrong opinion. They're just have a different opinion. Now, let's give an example of the wrong opinion, right? If someone suggests, well, we should wipe out half of the world population, like, okay, that's a wrong opinion. That's not a political opinion. That is an evil opinion, right? So, but that distinction needs to be made, because, I mean, if we want to debate about gun control, I'd be happy to. But, we need to make that distinction between a wrong opinion and a different opinion.
Well, see, I think that's again, I'm going to bring up the line for, or at least my idea of what the line should be between a political and a, human right issue, where as political issues, such as possibly, I would argue honestly that gun control is more of a political issue than a human rights issue, right? Where as like human rights issue, like there are some opinions that can be wrong or that are wrong in terms of human rights, not necessarily politics, right? Where it's like someone's like, oh, systemic racism in the US is fake. That's not a thing. There's more black people or in people of color in poverty because they work less hard, right? That's not an okay opinion.
There's no factual evidence for the fact that if there's more black people in poverty, they work less hard. That's just factually untrue, right? But when we're looking at the facts and gun control, if we look at a lot of advocates against gun control, I mean, let's be honest, gun control has a pretty dismal history of effectiveness across either America or the world. So, like, it's not, I mean, I think we're debating policy here, and if we skip over to, if you support this policy, then you are, you don't care about the people getting killed. Like, that's a bit of a jump. But we can continue debate if you want. But
well, I think that just specifically on this gun control topic, while we're here, that what you're saying about like how gun control doesn't necessarily have that big of an effect, I think that
Like, I
really
didn't say that. Oh, wait. Yes, I did. Never mind.
like I was just saying like maybe in some terms, you know, of your you know statement, you're correct, but I feel like that just also depends on the place where it's like how long have guns been in circulation there, right? Because guns have been in circulation in the United States for, you know, upwards of 300 years, you know, versus, you know, I'm gonna say like some really rural area out in like, or some island in like the Pacific Ocean where, you know, there's not really any major import or export, that there's just going to be less guns, right? And then putting gun control there where there's already not very many guns, then it would be as a lot more effective than it would
That's why,
be.
that's probably why gun control in America is not is probably it hasn't been effective in the places it's been implemented.
Right.
And I mean, as you said, there are so many guns in circulation in this country that banning them like that is not going to do anything, right? And we have to remember that a law makes something illegal but not impossible. So we are a major superpower in the world. So it would, you know, in for an example, drugs, right? Cocaine is illegal. People still got cocaine, right? And it's ravaged this country. And it is, and that's why we have a war on drugs. It's because it's such a problem. So like to say like, yeah, I mean, if we're just talking about policy, like, yeah, you know, gun control is not going to be effective in this country. It may be effective in somewhere where, you know, they have a history of never having, you know, guns in circulation, or, you know, not having the possibility to, you know, import or export items, right? But
Yeah.
would you, well, yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I mean, I'm pretty much agreeing with you. I'm just I wish I was in a position, or you know, I just don't. I mean, I'm being completely honest. If it were me, I wish that there was stricter gun control, but the thing is that that's not really going to do much in the United States, at least. And
Right.
I wish that that there was some, you know, that I could, you know, or that I had an ideas like, oh, you know, I just don't know what to do.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And that's the thing is like, you know, when we see both sides of that debate, it's like, you know, what's going to happen if we do take away guns from, you know, a lot of people who, you know, live in high crime areas, who maybe are a single parent, who, you know, a gun is an equalizer. So if we're talking about, you know, taking away guns from people, even though we know that the policy will have little to no effect, right? I mean, that would be immoral, right? At bottom line, like that would be jeopardizing, you know, a whole lot of people's lives. So, you know, no, I'm not saying that a burglar is going to break in and, you know, kill someone right now, but I also am saying that, you know, there's, you know, we all live in, I would assume, pretty good neighborhoods, or areas in Charlottesville where, you know, the crime rate is not as high as somewhere like, you know, a major city in America. So we just have to remember that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've got a buddy of mine, and you know, he was talking, you know, his we were talking, you know, he's, you know, I wouldn't say he's anti-gun control, and I would feel like you know, I feel like there's a very big difference between like what you were saying, Gabriel, like someone having a pistol for protection versus, you know, having like six AR-15s in your closet. You know what I mean? Which, you know, they sell them at Walmart.
Yeah, that doesn't seem very logical.
Meaning, yeah, I agree.
But does that mean we should ban them?
I mean, I personally, I don't see the point in a gun like that, but maybe I'm just like listening to too much anti-war John Lennon recently. So
Yeah.
I don't see the need for a gun like that in the first place.
This is going back to a point that Gabriel made about how like we can say that something is illegal, but people are still going to do it. I think like our government system, so we have a constitution that is old, like old. And we have all of us, everyone has just accepted everything for the most part. There have been amendments, but this is how we lived our life. And so the question that I'm posing here is if obviously I think that we do need, as because we are a whole population and we all have our own minds, I think that we do need some structure. But what do you, this is a difficult question, I think, because there's no like right answer, wrong answer. But what do you think our society would be like if we didn't have the Constitution?
Well, personally, I feel like the Constitution has been, like Gabriel was saying earlier, a pretty big guide in terms of, 1776 to where we are now, right? But I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement is the biggest quote unquote political movement in US history, or political movement, I would say. And like I feel like we're at a huge turning point where a lot of people are starting to realize that what? The America isn't perfect. America is the greatest country in the world. And like I'm not saying that we're less privileged, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't acknowledge our privilege, but I'm also saying there are a lot of people in America who have a lot less privilege than a lot of other people in America, and that is being completely ignored.
I also think the whole idea of the American dream has completely changed people's ideas of what it's actually like to
Oh,
be an American. And I am grateful and I am privileged to have been born American. Um, but I think so many people in our world assume that America doesn't have problems or like it's going to be better over here. But we have been working to make sure that every person is treated equally. We haven't been able to do that. And I I I'm going to use the word ridiculous. I think that's ridiculous. It doesn't, like, somebody's skin color should not determine your perception of like who they are. I am proud to be Indian, but I am not defined by the fact that I'm Indian. Like, my personality is here too. Everybody has a personality, and our world and America has just like specifically just decided that certain people aren't as important, and we have accepted it for years and just let it keep going. I don't understand who decided in the first place that that was how it was going to be. And then everyone was like, okay, let's do that.
Would you say that?
Not only accepted it, but protected it. And we're still, when we talk about like conservatism, like I don't know very much about what conservatives stand for or what conservatism means, but like they're so, at some point it's like, when did it become more important to defend laws and traditions over, I'm sorry, Gabriel, human rights?
Oh, well, I don't agree. Oh, I mean, don't say sorry. Like, I'm all for human rights.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we all are. The question is, how do we get those human rights in the first place? How do we make sure those are actually happening, right? And so some people may have a difference of opinion on policy to ensure those human rights than others, right? So, we have to remember that we are all, I think, for human rights. On the issue of conservatism, let's separate Republicans from conservatives. Republicans, I would say, the majority, at least in our government, support Trump. conservatives, that's just sort of a way of thinking. It is sort of based on, self reliability. It's based on a certain level of principles. And I would argue at this point that Trump is not really a true conservative. Okay? He was a Democrat most of his life. So, let's separate that. But I don't know that conservatives, maybe they are in the Senate and in Congress, but I don't know that they are, all of them are clinging to tradition. But to be fair, our Constitution has guided us in a way that most other countries lack, right? We can look at that from an international perspective. So some traditions are valid, some aren't, though. I mean, some aren't, but yeah, I mean, yeah.
We're at 7:00, guys. So if we have any if we have any final words, that would be awesome to wrap up. But otherwise, I think we've gone for a
I'm just gonna add
fair amount of time. Yeah.
That's okay. I find it incredibly interesting and almost disappointing that many of our beliefs haven't evolved like we have, as we have come from the 1700s. Many people's beliefs are still the same, and I think a lot of it is due to influence from the people around them and who they grown up with, what their family members believe. And I struggle to accept that I struggle to accept that people believe that some humans matter more than others. That is one of the biggest things for me. And I think I would say that all of you feel pretty similar about that. And I think just the fact that we still rely on the Constitution, we need the structure, and I think we've amended things that were outdated and needed to be amended, but some of the beliefs are just the fact that the fact that it's still even considered. Does that make sense? I struggle to say that beliefs are outdated because people still believe them. And so it's hard to define a belief as outdated. But I mean, for me personally, I think some beliefs are way too far in the past and haven't come to terms with the fact that we are trying to change what was a common notion 300 years ago.
Meredith, go ahead, Jacob.
Just real quick. I mean, I think that, everybody needs to learn to develop their own opinions rather than just steal from the atmosphere around them, just to add on to Vaya. For example, the Democratic Party, 200-300 years ago was, they were the ones who were, the founder of the Ku Klux Klan was a Democrat, right? And now when you look at the Ku Klux Klan today, last election in 2016, they had endorsed the Republican Party, right?
Didn't they endorse Trump?
Yeah, Trump administration, Republican Party. Yeah. So, you need to be susceptible to change and to, develop your own opinions. And don't support the Klan. That's not what I was saying whatsoever.
I also think that there's
we should make that the slogan for the podcast.
Don't support the
your
Klan.
own opinions, but don't support the Klan.
Nice. I like that.
Going back to what Jacob was saying, I also think there's some form of fear factor, because I mean, we're humans and a lot of us don't like change, but I think that has gone to an extreme. An extreme level of not wanting to change. And so there's fear towards the quote unquote unknown, or someone that's different from you. But I think that fear is like unnecessary. Does that, you know?
Yeah, I think that you're right. I wanted to go back to your point that you made earlier about, Meredith, do we have time for like one more question, or do we have to wrap it up? I would say it was a bit like unclear. Were you talking about, I think we all stand against racism, period, right? I would say. But in the Constitution, are you proposing, I mean, where in the Constitution, it seemed like you were saying that the Constitution somehow supported racism or enabled that in some way.
I don't know. I was just curious. Are you talking about like what the world would be like, or America would be like without the Constitution?
Well, no, I mean, maybe. I was just saying,
Trying to say?
What?
That's not what I was trying to say. I just think that like there's no, like, nowhere on the Constitution does it say, but there's also stuff that's like unwritten.
Yeah.
Has been assumed and, like I said, accepted, and then people just moved forward with it, didn't bother to change it for far too long. And then when people decided like, hey, that's not right, everyone had already like accepted it as something that was like okay.
And I just wanted to add to that, Vaya. All men are created equal, right? Meanwhile, there are slaves being owned, and women can't vote. Like
I said, it's in between the lines. You just have to.
Like, I don't want to put words in Vaya's mouth, but I think like what she's saying is, you know, there's nothing explicit in the Constitution, but like there's still something in the Constitution that says, you know, if you're arrested, you are like, slavery is illegal, but if you're arrested, slavery is okay. Like, I didn't say that very well, but
I think that it's if you're I don't know what the nitty gritty of it is, but I'm pretty sure it's like if you're a criminal, you're in jail, you're considered a slave to the state. Meanwhile,
where does it say that in the Constitution?
Find it somewhere.
It's somewhere. I don't know if it's on the Constitution, but it's a thing. It was in some old document. I don't know if I don't think it's a Constitution, but
slavery amendment probably.
Yeah, but and that's like
it abolished the 13th Amendment abolished slavery as involuntary servitude except as punishment for a crime.
And so like that, and you pair that with a system where, I don't want to ramble on for too long because, we were supposed to be wrapping up a few minutes ago, that, in a system where really it's plagued with, when you look at like redlining housing, whereas when slavery ended, slavery didn't really end because what happened was you put all the people of color and all the slaves in these redlined areas and you kept them together and you made them really poor. You gave them bad education so that there'd be higher crime and then low income. And so that crime would lead to them being put in jail, right? And people like look at Lincoln as this sort of god who just ended slavery like that. But really it's just that white savior trope that you're looking at. And because that amendment that Meredith said is still in effect, and it'll take, I'm pretty sure that without new policy reform, it was some study, an estimated 200 years for that white black wealth gap in America to end. And I feel very strongly about this, and I won't go on anymore. Because I could talk about this for hours, but I won't.
Yeah, one thing to note about the Constitution is that there are some, hypocritical aspects of it, right? I mean, as we were saying, like all men created equal. Well, there were slaves, there were this, there were that, and so, but we also have to recognize that, you know, we have made such tremendous progress, and, you know, not to say that we're there. We are not in any way perfect, and we still have major problems that need to be addressed. But we also, I mean, we can't deny that now, you know, we have made progress where women, you know, do have the right to vote, where slavery is illegal, where this and that, and that was guided by the Constitution. So maybe Jefferson, you know, who, you know, I think the Constitution is a pretty important document, even if the people who wrote it, you know, maybe were a bit hypocritical, right? It has guided us to make extremely necessary reforms in this country, and I think it's gone for the better. But, you know, I think we could probably go on for hours talking about whether we need the Constitution or not. But I think that's probably a whole nother debate.
Yeah. Shall we wrap it up, guys, or say goodbye? For all my stab people, I'll see you tomorrow. And Jacob, I hope you have an awesome time at Andrews. If I don't hear or see him. Oh,
What?
sorry. I turned on my emergency SOS on accident a lot.
The popo.
They're coming for us.
They're coming.
Better defund them.
Oh boy.
All
Right.
That's for another time.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to talk about that with anyone who wants
Yeah,
to.
totally, sure.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Great.
Thank you, Meredith.
Yeah, thank you for hosting this.
That was great.
Bye.